You have yours online, I suppose. Not, you wouldn't print such a thing. Yes, that's all right. ממש את ההפעלה הראשונית, בגלל זה רוצה שכבר כמה עכשיו. מה? אפשר לצחק לעבור.
ליד אינקה, אתם רוצים את אינקה, אז תמשיכו פה, ברמזור השחור תמשיכו, זה יהיה פעילות בכביש.
היה בבקשה.
עכשיו זה רק על זה. כאילו, בדיוק שאתה מוכן, זה בסדר.
טוב, לפחות 10 דקות אתם שם.
אז ללכת לשם? תדבר?
לא, אני זה ללכת. אני לא עושה עכשיו שהוא סתם פעם שם גם. אני מרגיש לו עושים לצור על רצח.
כן. אני מסתכל על המספר של אנשים. מה? לא, אם עוד גסם, אנחנו מתחילים ככה, זה איך שאנחנו כל הזמן ככה. אוקיי, welcome everyone! Live from Jerusalem. Welcome to Florence Melton School's travel seminar online. Our very first attempt at doing this. And you, our staff members and our members of the travel committee, all of you are together with a group of us right here. People, staff members and spouses from here who work for the Florence Melton School Institute here in Jerusalem have joined us here today as well. The way it works, this is a live stream. It's not Zoom. I know we've been very used to Zoom for months now. On live stream, you're going to be seeing the tour, seeing everything that's happening. You have the opportunity to ask questions through the chat on your screen. You should see a place where you can, on the bottom, there's a little smiley face. You can put in a few words down there if you have questions or comments. I'll be following that, and from time to time we'll be able to bring those questions to our illustrious Madrich, our tour guide, who I'm going to turn things over to right now, Haim Aronovitz.
Hi. Hello. Welcome to Jerusalem. In the background you should be able to make out the sounds of the bells marking the hour here. It's not the bells of Hasidim, but we are at a point in time that we call, by Jewish tradition, Ben HaMetzarim, the period that's within the straits. Last week we marked the 17th day of Tammuz, a fast day. Within 2 weeks we will be marking Tisha B'Av, and in a certain sense it's perhaps the most appropriate time for us to be doing this particular outing together. So really welcome to be that. I'm so pleased that you are with us. I called it Digging Deep because in a certain sense the exploration of the world of the archaeologist Gabi Barkai, who we will be hearing a fair amount about in the next hour and a half, takes us back as far as one would want to go in certain senses. We're going back all the way to the Jerusalem, which you could call the Jerusalem of the First Temple period. And I said to you it's an appropriate time of the year for us to be here, because this period of the 3 weeks of mourning marks for us the point leading up to the destruction of the First Temple. And in fact, the excavation that will serve as the focus for us in the latter part of our visit is really an excavation that takes us back to temple times. Digging deep means that we're digging from the beginning, and we're digging from our surroundings now, or we will reach the earliest period as we go back in time. And therefore it's not just the bells that are marking the hour of 6 here in Jerusalem. It's also the traffic of people making their way home. We're not under any kind of government ordered going back into enclosure of any sort. The traffic is busy, and that noise will disturb us for just a few minutes. But what I'd like you to do with me for the coming 2 or 3 minutes is the group, we're all going to move from here, and Elad, our videographer, is going to be taking the camera and helping us get to the point. Hi Elad, thank you for being with us now. And what we're going to do is just go to this nearby intersection, and I will have one sacrifice to go into the middle of the street to help us get these sensitive areas. So let's go to that point. In the meantime, who's our volunteer? No one. Okay, as we're coming here, I'm going to ask you that you focus with me up that direction. I'm going to call it to the north. And when you're looking towards the north now, this busy intersection is familiar to very many of the people who are online right now. You know this area. On the other side of the road, we have what's called Liberty Bell Gardens. Beyond it, you can see, if the sun is not disturbing you too much, a hotel called the Inbal Hotel, home of many, many Melton seminars over the years. And later on, we'll get the rest of the view that we've got here. But in looking up, if we're looking towards the north, the thing that will strike all of us, especially those of us who are here right now, is that as we're looking up there, it's that we're looking up. We're at a low point over here. And I want to suggest to you that as we do a 360-degree look around here, you should try and get the sense, get the bearings that you have of this area, and do it with me. So if that's north, one of the best things in a seminar within the first day is to find out who is directionally challenged. If we go to your left, which way are we going to be going? Maurice, as usual, always ask the rabbi. If you go to the west, it's that way. And when we're looking that way now, I want you to get the sense for yourselves. Can you feel the way that we're going downhill from here? Right? To the west, downhill. And for those of you who know Jerusalem, and that's the bulk of the people, as I say, who are on this call, going down that hill means going down what is known as Emek Rephaim, the valley of, what are Rephaim? Are they giants? Are they ghosts? Whichever way you want to take it. Emek Rephaim goes down from this area, breaks away to the west from us now. Let's quickly, we won't finish the 360 quite in the way that you're used to it. I want you to come with me just a few steps, and we're going to look towards the east. So as we're going to the east, that's going to be for my left, and let's get the sense of bearings that we have as we're looking east now. Position yourselves in such a way that you can, if you're with me. You guys on YouTube have it easy. Because what's very clear, if I'm looking now towards the east, is that, am I looking up or down? It's a silly question. I'm really looking down. And that's because this very busy street that is now just behind us, this very busy street, is actually on the National Water Divide. What you've got over here is the situation that if you were to be a raindrop, the South Africans online will know what I'm talking about, you would flow to the east, down that way, and to the west, down that way. We're at the point where that's the actual divide. I left out one direction for us, so let's follow that direction too. And let's turn south for a moment. I hope that you're okay with your sun in your eyes. Okay, so I'm glad that you've got the chance to see a city that's alive, that other groups of Israeli tourists are walking around here right now. You can see them. They've probably been talking about some of the things that we'll be looking at because they came from that direction. But who knows? Maybe they've got a better tour and Elad will want to join them in just a moment. I want to add this fourth direction for us. We left out south. And when we're looking down the street now, look with me at the bus that's coming towards us. can you see that the bus makes absolutely no effort to come towards us because the ground is level? This direction to the south is the level land. And if you go to the front page of the notes which we sent to you, and you have a look at that topographical map that I gave to you, that I sent to you, you need not worry too much about, thank you. You need not worry too much about it, because the topographical map, all of those very fine lines, each one marks another 5 meters up or down to its neighbor. And if you look at the point which marks where we're at, you'll see that there's a level area there. That's exactly what we're looking at right now. It goes to a high area just above and to the right of the number 0, and that's at 755 meters above sea level. That's higher than the Temple Mount. And that's the hill which we'll get another glimpse of from another direction a bit later. Why am I giving you so much topography? Well, you'll see how important it becomes for our story. Because if you are making your way from the south, let's say like some of the people that I'm looking at right now, they may have come from the area of Efrat. Efrat is near Bethlehem. We know it from the book of Ruth. We know it from other sources. We know it from when Rachel dies on her way, Ephrata, the outskirts of it. And so, if you're coming from that direction, which further south will take you as far as Hebron, if you're wanting to go on the level ground and not go up and down, you'll have been coming along Hebron Road, which is all the way back there and a little bit to the left. And you will have a level walk, remember, or wagon ride or animal ride, whatever it is that you're relying on for your transportation. We're relying for the moment on our sense of things when we go there. And that's why I want to add another facet to the story. Have a look very quickly at the photographs that you have coming after the first set of sources that you've got. The buck stops here, you could say. Or you could say it's the end of the line. Because the end of the line that we've got over there is the Jerusalem train station. And where's the Jerusalem train station again? For those of you who know Jerusalem, you've gone there very often for meals. Straight along here and to your right. That's the first station now. Fine restaurants, entertainment, all sorts of special things in the summer, like special Kabbalat Shabbat services for people of every denomination, interfaith activities, everything that you could wish in where the train station was. But I added a picture because I knew that you guys wouldn't want to cross this busy road with me right now. If you look to where I'm now pointing, where Elad is showing us, you can see there's a yellow fire hydrant perhaps, and just to the right of the yellow fire hydrant, you've got the photograph that is on the next image that you've got on your sheets. You can actually see the yellow fire hydrant sticking out of the fence there. That's where the train line ends. Some of you will say, who cares about where they finished the train line in 1892? Others of you will say, I've suddenly understood why they ended the train line there and not 50 yards further. Because 50 yards further they would have had to go up or go down. But what they can do over here is have the train to Jerusalem coming thus far and within easy reach in 1892 of what was the bulk of the city of Jerusalem, which is the old city, along with the few neighborhoods that have developed since then. I've given you this broad geographical background, and I want you to have a look at the first sources which are on the page, the other side of the page that you were looking at. Thanks very much. And perhaps to do this, so that we won't have this noise with us, let's go for a moment. You know what? I don't know how bad the noise is for you people over there. If you guys can hear me easily enough, we're going to listen in and have a look at the two texts that you've got there. Joshua chapter 15 and Joshua chapter 18. And if we listen to those two texts, perhaps we'll even get someone who's prepared to read it for us, just a few verses of it, Is there someone who's willing to volunteer to do that for us? No? Okay. We're not going to wait for someone to come in from the other side of the world, but we can, for a moment, get a chance to listen in to Maury will read for us. Maury, will you take us from verse 5, just read verse 5 and then carry on through to the end of 7 and then from the end of 7 to the end of the passage.
Skip 7 or
go to Ein Rogel and then the boundary. Okay? So the beginning of 5.
The boundary on the east was the Dead Sea up to the mouth of the Jordan. On the northern side, the boundary began at the tongue of the sea at the mouth of the Jordan.
Okay, and let's go down now to the end of verse 8 and the whole of 9. The boundary then ran.
The boundary then ran up to the top of the hill which flanks the valley of Hinnom on the west, at the northern end of the valley of Rephaim. From that hilltop, the boundary curved to the fountain of the waters of Nephtoch and ran on to the towns of Mount Ephron. Then the boundary curved to Baalah, that is, Kiryat Yarim.
Well, those of you who've had the chance to be with us on a seminar will know that many of these place names are familiar to us. I actually should have said to Maury, start just a few words before, at the beginning of verse 8. Because it says there, then the boundary ascended into the valley of Ben Hinnom along the southern flank of the Jebusites. And the editor says, we have editors amongst us even over here, the editor says, that is Jerusalem. And if we go to Joshua chapter 18, let's listen in to what happens from Kiryat Yarim at the end of verse 14, if Maury will pick it up again for us and read 15 and 16.
The southern rim, from the outskirts of Kiryat Yarim, the boundary passed from the west and ran on to the fountain of the waters of Nephtoch. Then the boundary descended to the foot of the hill by the valley of Ben Hinnom, at the northern end of the valley of Rephaim. Then it ran down the valley of Hinnom, along the southern flank of the Jebusites to Ein Rogel.
All right. So, Kaveri, did any of those places ring a bell for you? You see there's the valley of Rephaim. You remember that I talked about it when we looked to the west? This is the beginning of the street of Jerusalem called Emek Rephaim, the valley of Rephaim. And then it ran down, if we follow the last passage, to the east, down the valley of Hinnom, along the southern flank of the Jebusites to Ein Rogel. What's happened in these 2 chapters from the book of Joshua? They're mirror images, one coming from the east to the west, and I see the light coming from the west to the east in the second of those readings. I want you, as we move to our next point, to pause for a moment and ask yourselves, what is the way that we understand the relating to of that city of the Jebusites? And we're going to take that question with us as we make our way towards our next stop. Okay, let's go. As we're walking, I'm going to ask you to walk with me at a fairly steady pace so that those people who are following us from afar don't have to wait too long. But at the same time, if you have questions, you're welcome to come through with them. We're going into part of what is a national park in Israel. It's the Jerusalem, it's the park that was established around the old city in the wake of the 6-Day War. And putting it in terms of its context of when it was built or developed is important for us. Because part of our story has to do with how, when the city, after 1967, developed, how this area is going to be itself developing. So let's just make our way. We've got about 100 yards or so to walk. I hope you'll be okay. If anyone needs water, you're welcome to get from me too. Sorry. The heat of the day is broken in Jerusalem now. It's actually becoming pleasant. The breeze is coming up. And I'm hoping that you'll have the pleasure of now not having the sun on you for almost the rest of the time. Watch out for the steps as we go down. We just have to walk another minute or so, and we should be fine.
כן, כאילו כשאנחנו הולכים.
That's actually why I didn't want to read. Yeah.
Okay, let's get a little bit closer. I'm going to suggest that you actually make your way a little bit closer, perhaps on the two edges over there. As we take in the view from here, I'm hoping that in your mind's eye, you're getting the chance to look now and translate between that topographic map and the reality that we're seeing over here. And the closer the lines are, the deeper the drop, or the more rapid the drop, right? Remember, 5 meters from between lines, so if they're very, 5 meters height for each line. If they're very, very close, you're going almost directly down. And in fact, what we can do, if we get the camera to zoom in a little bit closer on the view beneath us, you'll be able to see the valley, which is called the Sultan's Pool, to our left, towards the old city. Those of you who recognize the Jaffa Gate area somewhere above the valley over there. And then the walls of the city coming towards the south to Mount Zion, which is that tall tower that we have above us over there. If that's Mount Zion, from the drop between Mount Zion and where we are standing now and to our right, have a look at how that drop goes. And it gets steeper and steeper, making the way down into a valley known as the Valley of Bnei Hinnom, or the Valley of Hinnom. And I'm going to expand on that in just a few moments, but I want you to pick up one more thing, because I kind of feel that I owe you. Because the train, you could turn around and say, couldn't go further that way. But why couldn't you, if you were walking, just carry on walking straight due north from Bethlehem or Ephrat? And now, when we see, most particularly, down beneath us, to the right of where you can see a square, it's actually an elevator shaft for the Cinematheque, the Jerusalem Cinematheque. That roof that you see there, that square roof, just to its right, have a look at those walls, the escarpment there, and you can see that it would be almost impossible for a vehicle of any sort, and even for a person who's not a good climber, to be able to go straight from the Hebron Road towards the city of Jerusalem. If you want to go back to those verses of Joshua, look how well now we understand that boundary that represented the southern boundary. But I set you a question. And I asked the question about why then, how do you understand this issue about Jerusalem and the Jebusites in the text? I don't know if anyone responded, Maury. But if no one has responded to it, perhaps there's even someone now who either wants to respond, or someone amongst us over here who would like to relate to this issue of the way that we see the definition of the boundaries between the tribes. The tribe that we've got in that direction is Judah. The tribe that we've got in this direction is Benjamin or Binyamin. And if those two tribes then, to get their tribal boundary, where does it lie according to the book of Joshua? So perhaps we can, for a moment, are you prepared to uncover your mask and share with us something, please? I think it looks like Judy behind that mask.
Are you suggesting that Jerusalem was the boundary between Judah and Benjamin? Is that what it is?
Is it in the land of either of them? From this description,
It's Jebusite. So
it's a Jebusite city. It's not part of the tribes of either of those tribes. It's on the boundary between them, but the city of what it says there, that is Jerusalem, Yevus, Jebusite, or Jebus, that is Jerusalem, it would seem to indicate that whenever the book of Joshua is written, it's written in a context of, this doesn't belong to, it belongs to the Jebusites. But to make the reader, at the time of its coming out, being published, able to know what they're talking about, so that extra line is added there. That is Jerusalem. Remember it. And so, that's one element that we've got there. But I want to take you to one more biblical story, very briefly over here. You know what? We'll do it when we can sit down and perhaps understand that story a little bit better. But at the essence of the story, I want you to be able to take in the view once again. If you were making your way south to north in ancient times, I'm calling them pre-temple times, Israelite tribal times. If you're making your way from south to north in that reality, and the sun, which is even now falling behind the trees, we're at the hour now, which is, it's almost the Ila for us. It's almost time to close the gates. I hope they don't lock us out of the place we're heading to. But if you see the sun going down, and you're making your way on that north-south axis, which you would have chosen not to drop down and go up all the time to go along. So the text describes, maybe we should take our rest in another city. And you know what? Let's have a look at that text very quickly. We'll get it out the way now. The text is the third one on that page which you were looking at before. And it says to us, it's taken from the book of Judges. And if you'll allow me then, is there anyone here who was ever an education officer in the army? Did you ever hear the story about Pilegesh Bagivai in the army, Dr. Dieter?
We ignored that.
Sorry?
We skipped that story. It was too spicy.
All right. So the story is about a man and his concubine. And those of you who've come on the biblical seminar, Biblical Insight seminar, will know more about the story. That's just a plug for you to come and join us. But this part of the story isn't the racy part that Howie Dieter always didn't understand when the other officers would say, why don't we study Pilegesh Bagivah, the story of the concubine on the hill, or at Givah? Listen to the part that's important for us. Then the man, his concubine, and his attendant started to leave. His father-in-law, the girl's father, said to him, look, the day is waning towards evening. Do stop for the night. See, the day is declining. Spend the night here and enjoy yourself. You can start early tomorrow on your journey and head for home. But the man refused to stay for the night. He set out and traveled as far as the vicinity of Yevus, the Jebusite city. And again, in the book of Judges, it then says, that is Jerusalem. People have to know. It's got to be explained, okay? He had with him a pair of laden donkeys, and his concubine was with him. Since they were close to Yevus, and the day was very far spent, the attendant said to his master, let us turn aside to this town of the Jebusites and spend the night in it. Chaverim, how would you do that? You would turn from where we met and go to the Jebusite town, which is behind where that bus has just come from, the other side of Mount Zion. You would come from there where the Jebusite town is. And if I go all the way to your front map that you had, your front page, on that map, you had there a little area marked as the Gihon spring, and that is the spring that gave the water to the Jebusite town. So here's the Jebusite town. We're now a little bit in from there. We're 100 yards in from there. We're closer. And the story of the book of Judges says, should we go there to get our night's rest? And his answer is, no, we will not turn aside to a town of aliens who are not of Israel, but instead we're going to continue to give up. For those of you who are intrigued by the story, I'm quite seriously telling you that in 1980, a man by the name of Zev was our guide, and he said to all of the soldiers that he was leading, you know the story of Pilegesh Bagivah, the concubine at Givah? And I was the only person who never heard the story, because back in South Africa they never taught us those stories. So those of you who are looking for the story, go into the book of Judges, and it's going to be after these verses from chapter 19 as part of the story. I used this setting for us to take us to another text. And I'd like you to move on to one more text that we will look at over here. And it's the text which is from the book of Jeremiah. We're talking about the Valley of Hinnom. And again, if there's anyone who wants to respond, when you hear the Valley of Hinnom and you see that I wrote there the word Gehenna, I don't know which of them speaks to any of you. I hope that it doesn't speak to anybody. But I suspect that at least one or two of you have heard other people being sent to the Valley of Hinnom, or the Valley of the Sons of Hinnom. And from the manner in which you're nodding your head, you've wished many people that they should visit that valley. So that's the Valley of Gehenna, or the Valley of Hinnom. Gehenna is the Yiddish word for hell. How did Gei Ben Hinnom, Gei Hinnom, Gehenna, how did it become a synonym for everything that is evil? And perhaps, therefore, if you're prepared to read for us a little bit of that story, without your mask, come a little bit forward, please. That will be great. And we can be looking at the Valley of Hinnom as we hear the text that takes us to that valley.
Where do you want me to read from?
Go,
The
the
beginning?
book of Jeremiah 19, yes.
Okay. Thus said the Lord, go buy a jug of potter's ware and take some of the elders of the people and the priests. Go out to the valley of Ben Hinnom at the entrance to the Harsith gate and proclaim there the words which I will speak to you. Say, hear the word of the Lord, O kings of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem. Thus said the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, I am going to bring such disaster upon this place that the ears of all who hear about it will tingle. For they and their fathers and the kings of Judah have forsaken me and have made this place alien to me. They have sacrificed in it to other gods whom they have not experienced, and they have filled this place with the blood of the innocent. They have built shrines to Baal, to put their children to the fire as burnt offerings to Baal, which I never commanded, never decreed, and which never came to my mind. Assuredly, a time is coming, declares the Lord, when this place shall no longer be called Topheth or Valley of Ben Hinnom, but Valley of Slaughter.
Thank you very much. So we're taking that with us as we move, and we're going to move just for another 2 minutes of walking back to a spot where we'll be able to sit down for a few moments and get our introduction to the next stage of what I want to do with you. But what I'm hoping that in terms of this setting should be clear to you is the following. Jeremiah is writing his passage at the time when the first temple is still standing. I told you that we're in this period now of these weeks where we go back in time, something like over 2,500 years in terms of our identity and our sense of Jewish time. When Jeremiah writes what he's writing, he's describing this valley as being a place that is a terrible place. And I want you to be looking at that along with everything else that we're going to have in the next 40 minutes or so as opportunities to get an insight into that period of time, to get an insight into the manner in which those Israelites, I can't even say those Jews, because there's no such thing as a Jew then, unless you're from the tribe of Judah. Those people, how do they live their lives? What's clear from these passages is that there's commerce going on in pre-temple times from the book of Judges, in terms of allocation of lands from the book of Joshua, from the entry into the land and the description of the boundaries of the tribes. And as the tribes settle in, they've come in from what is for us the furthest most view that we can see, the other side of the Dead Sea, the mountains of Moab that are across over there. Unfortunately, it's too hazy right now to see it clearly, but believe you me, it's there. And they've come across north of the Dead Sea, come into the land, and now a few centuries later are living in the land. And in living in the land, the question is, how do they live their lives? That's what we're going to be looking at together for the coming few minutes. So can we move on then to a spot where we'll be able to take our story that stage further? And in doing so, again, if you have questions, that's fine. Come along with them, come forward. Elad and I will be walking at a fairly fast pace in order to be save the time. But I'm just wondering, Maury, if there are any things that are coming from anywhere else that we need to know about.
Did you say I'm doing a great job, Chaim? That's
No, that's You can't trust them. Are they American?
Most of them. There's one British person online.
And they're just enjoying the walk.
Maybe we can take
It's
this
so much-
opportunity to oh, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah.
Take an opportunity to introduce the people who are here as we're walking. You can keep walking.
Oh,
I think
okay.
a lot can walk backwards.
Okay.
For Christmas.
I walking.
He's
So-
younger.
Just reading a second ago was I mentioned on the chat. Ilana Brown was our proofreader, and behind her is Judy Snowbell Diamond. But everyone's wearing a mask, so you might not recognize them. But and Eitan, her husband, and then in the back they're also in masks. A.B. Weschler and Tirza Weschler. A.B.'s been working with us for about 15 years at least. As our editor-in-chief of Melton Curriculum. And then back there is the, of course, our professor, Dr. Howie Deacher, also wearing a mask. He's incognito today. Doesn't want anyone to see him on the streets. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's good. That's a good move. Whoops. And then Liel. Liel, where are you? Hiding back there. Liel has been assisting Haim on and off this past year and again this summer in producing materials for him for travel seminars. And over here we have Allison and Stevie. They're now living in Ashkelon. Allison has been, she works our web design for years now. And the two of them recently left Rehovot to move to Ashkelon. Are we gonna go? I think so.
Great job.
I think so. Michael Troner wants to make sure you have your mask on time.
The doctor here.
Okay.
Andrew is excited to see you, Liel.
Yeah, we see what you are waiting.
Okay. Let's gather over here for just a few minutes. There's at least there's room for 2 socially distanced or 4 connected people. But certainly for those who would like to take if you want to have use the bench, it may as well be used. It's a pity to waste it. At least enjoy the shade where we are right now. And I'm going to take just a few minutes of background over here, so be comfortable however you wish to do things. In terms of the images that you have so that you can perhaps get a better sense of things, I've turned now to a page which has on the top of it the Gazelle Fort, it says at the top, and then beneath it St. John Extramuros. And I have to embarrassedly share with you that it shouldn't be St. John, but it should rather be St. George. I was listening to the Beatles the other day and I realized that I'd mixed those 2 guys up. So certainly by...
As long as it wasn't St. Ringo.
Or St. Paul would have been a problem too. But however it is, we'll look at those 2 images in just a few moments, because what I want to capture for you is the following. It's the story, which is a life story, and it's a fascinating one. I want you to imagine a man. His name is today Professor Gabriel Barkai, now emeritus, now retired. But Gabi, born in 1944, finds himself at the age of 10 moving from Hungary to Palestine, to Israel, the young state of Israel. Decides to study archaeology. In 1968, he's already working on digs which are taking place when I say 1968, your ears are ringing because you're saying to yourselves, what's the context? Well, it's very clear. Straight after the war, he's working with a professor from Tel Aviv University, and that professor is leading excavations taking place. If you look at your map of the contours again, go to the Gichon Spring, and just on the right side of the Gichon Spring is the village of Silwan, or Shiloach. And in the slopes of that village are a number of burial chambers, which in the post-1967 war, that whole area now being in Israeli hands, are going to be explored. You can see a YouTube, not with me, but with Gabi himself, describing what it was like going in 1968 into those caves. Those burial chambers that were being used sometimes for people as sleeping areas for themselves, sometimes for their animals, sometimes as chicken coops. But a whole lot of burial chambers that went back as far as 2,700 years ago. And they were part and parcel of the life of the village of Silwan. Looking for a space, if that space has been carved by someone else for you, they've saved you work. And that is the way of the world over the last few thousands of years. Okay? All of humankind has done the same thing in that respect. And so Gabi carries on with his studies. And he completes his degree at Tel Aviv University. He gets his master's magna cum laude in archaeology. And he's looking for a doctoral thesis. And it's the early 70s. The early 70s is not that view of Jerusalem with all that you saw a short while ago. In the early 70s, what we have on this side of where I'm pointing to is a road going up to the Scottish Church, which also serves as a hotel, and a building which you can see if you look to your right across here. You can see amongst the trees a building sticking up, and that is the Gazelle Fort. Qasr al-Ghazal, or Razal, as it's often pronounced in Arabic. And so Gabi knows the buildings are there. They're from Ottoman period. And he knows that this road is running along an area where at the lower parts of it, other people have excavated in the past, but not extensively. And he says to himself an interesting thing. This is the mind of an archaeologist. I wish I could say that I would have been as intuitively innovative in the way that he was looking at things. Because Gabi looks at the story and he says, there's Jerusalem. We're in the hinterland around Jerusalem. Those slopes mean that no one could have gone up and down those slopes, and the neighborhoods wouldn't have included in ancient times the areas which are to the south of that deep valley that we just went to look at. I'm going to go and check the area which is the natural connecting point for anyone going south-north before they leave for Jerusalem through the centuries, through all of recorded Jerusalem time, or Jebusite time, you could say. And he says, I'm going to start working in this area because of a strategic advantage. As we go in another few moments, Elad will let us see the incredible view that we have. And so Gabi starts his work over here in 1975. He wants to get his doctorate. He's checked the way that people have been burying their dead over the centuries in different parts of Jerusalem, including going back with his professor from Tel Aviv U to First Temple times. And when he starts working in this area, there have been some elements that have been uncovered over here in the past. But amongst the first things that he finds is the whole of this grass area that you see marked over here, which is laid out. The grass area is actually the floor, the interior of a church. And that church was called St. George, not St. John, but St. George Extramuros. Now amongst us are those who had to study Latin in order to become doctors. So extramuros is very easy for you, right? Extra, out of. Muris, walls. And when you think that this is St. George out of the walls, you're all saying, oh, that seems obvious. The only problem is that until the identification of this site as being that Byzantine church, people thought that St. George Extramuros was in the area of the present-day entrance to Jerusalem, at the building called the National Convention Center, Binyanei Uma. That's where all the archaeologists said this must be the supposed site of that church. When they found written evidence that it was over here, and they found part of the floor with its beautiful mosaics. One little element I captured for you over there of this partridge eating grapes with another animal just behind it. And the floor was in bad condition. But what he found over here was enough to give him enough material to get his doctorate. But that was what he was working on. He therefore made a major discovery in terms of the career of an archaeologist at that point in time when he'd identified the church that is over here. But we're going to go and see what else he managed to identify over here. And as we go into the story, remember what we're trying to do is to dig deep. But in digging deep, it's not just that we want to get to bedrock. We want to understand the layers and levels of the civilization, or maybe I should say that in plural, that he's uncovering. So come with me on that journey.
That's what we're doing today. There's a culture going on here.
שנייה לפניך, שלך נוח לדבר?
Let's gather. We're not going to go over the boundary just yet, but I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to ask our participants from all over to have a look and see, as Alad gives us a sense of the space that we're looking in. And in doing so, Alad, what I'm going to ask you to do is just to help us to see the area as we can try and read it. For a start, we have an entrance area, and then this deep pit that's over here. Okay? Secondly, let's see what else we can see has been excavated here. Can you guys see that this has been carved out over here? And look how, in fact, if you're 6,000 miles away from us, you can see it even better than if you're 10 feet away. Okay? Because Alad's giving you the close-up, as good an indication as possible. But you can see that the stone has been carved here. And if we carry on with the direction that we can pick up from this, quite clearly, there's been cutting out of the rock over here in various ways. One more little element, and then I'm going to ask you perhaps to chat and say, what do you think that you're seeing over here? Can you see this particular spot? Not the tree so much, but the rock as it's cut over there. And any way that you can perhaps give some sort of supposition of what you're seeing. So I'll give you a moment or two to process it. It may be longer than that. But I also will show you one more thing, because I know that it's useful for some of you to get a sense of the height of things as well. I want you to look at that corner now, and that corner over there, in terms of someone who is of standard height or even tall for around 2,500 years ago. Okay, so I'm throwing that in for Dr. Troner so that he should know that I'm aware of his perspective on things from up there. Okay, anyone got an answer for us? What are you noticing about it? Maury?
No one here. There's stones behind. There's something.
Okay.
Like, maybe someone here.
From our angle, it looks like on this left-hand side, it's a little rounded. So I'm thinking something was rounded overhead. and you have just enough room to have your head clearance.
Okay.
But I don't know.
So, if Alison's supposition is okay, and I'm going to go with
How
it.
about, there is a suggestion.
Yes.
Michael Troner suggests it's a mikveh or a burial chamber.
Which one, Michael? You have 3 seconds to answer.
There's a 5-second delay, so you have to give him 5
That's why I'm only giving him 3. Okay. Because Michael's on the board, I'm going to say he's quite right. But in fact, I'm only going to take his being quite right in the context of one of those 2 answers. Because Alison's suggestion, and I think that Michael's reading of it as well, is that if we go from here and imagine this being stretched at that, from that height, maybe even a bit higher, all the way across to where the entrance was. Forget where we're standing now when we're approaching here. We've got a cave that has been dug into the rock here, and this is its ceiling. That's the height of it. Down here, we have an area that's been cleared, and there are ledges on the side of it, which we're going to use as background information.
Michael goes for burial as the final.
So I
Final
think that
answer.
is that Michael's
Michael's
suggestion.
final answer is burial. Just
So in that case, we're going to put him into the next stage of the competition, along with the others. But I wanted us to start with something that is actually very little to see here. I wanted you to begin to see what happens when you're actually coming. There's no begging center behind. There's no clear path that you're walking on. You're digging into an area where when you get rid and when you get down to bedrock, you get down to this. But to get down to this required of Gabi Barkai and his volunteers to clear everything that was above. Let's go on just a little bit further. We'll pick up the story again in less than a minute. But now you're going to all read it along with Elad's help that he's going to give us as we go along further. Let's go, Elad. Okay, so we're going along, and I want you to imagine that we've got a whole series. Now it's becoming much easier as you come to the next one. Have a look over there. Okay?
Oh.
And there it seems much clearer to you. And as we go further along, I'm hoping that the explanation that we got from the first one is now falling in place for each of you as you're looking at the next ones. It's a matter of just a moment to let us get a sense of things over here. Again, Elad's going to help us look at this, but the complex, there's a complex over here. Forget about where we've been walking on our path. Come into this. There is an antechamber, a foreroom over here, a large step that you have to go down, and then you're in a place where the ceiling is very, very clear, right? Michael was quite right about it. Alison's assumption was quite correct about it. All of this would have been covered with a roof that has caved in at some or another point. But what we have over here is a complex in which there's not just the question of a roof over a central area and side chambers, but alongside those side chambers, some of them have got beneath them storage, let's call it for the moment, storage areas. And here we have a more or less intact roof which has not yet caved in. All of this was part of what was being excavated. And when Gabi begins in 1975, doing his job, he proceeds over the coming 4 years, every season, coming here, getting assistance from the Ministry of Education, who lets school kids come and spend a few days on a dig. It's called exploitation of the children, or education. It's another form of it. Okay? And what they're uncovering, step after step, is a series of burial chambers, as was described by Michael earlier on. Now what we're going to do, though, is look at what's above us and get a sense of that setting as well. And as we're looking at the building that you see there, That building is called St. Andrew's, or the Scottish Church. It's flying a very miserable flag right now, and unfortunately we can't get in there anyway. But look at where it was built. And go back to the 1920s, it's mandatory Palestine. The British are running the country. They actually house the British consulate in this building complex, and the church is the building to the left on top of that hill, which is the hill opposite the train station. We're going to keep that in mind in one context for you. I think for me it's fascinating. What would have happened if in 1927 they would have decided to build just a few yards further across this direction? Would they have in fact uncovered all of this the way that it was uncovered in the 70s? Some of it was uncovered already by them, but they didn't know what they were looking at too much. Or would this have just been destroyed? But as it is, the church was built right to the edge of the bedrock over here, and we can see it emerging out of the bedrock from the spot that we're heading towards right now. Let's head there and take into account what we can see.
Is really anyone?
Over the link. מישהו נכנס, ראית את זה?
מישהו
מישהו נכנס ואמר, Shalom Jews, how are you? But I blocked him. But,
אוקיי.
איך זה קורה? מישהו...
אני יודע למה, בסדר. אני יודע שזה לא יקרה.
Okay. Let's get into this area. And I'm going to suggest even that you perhaps consider coming and sitting on the steps over here or alongside the entrance. The closer that you come, the better. But before you actually sit down, do look around a little bit. And let's get the sense of the space that we've now entered. And I'm hoping that for you people, as Allah helps us look around a little bit, you also do have an image that you'll be able to use to position yourselves over here. It's underneath the picture of the Scottish Church, and there are two texts over there that we'll use as a little bit of a background as well for ourselves over here. So, from the book of Judges, there's a phrase that appears there, and I called that page, this page of text for us, the Great Chain of Being. Maybe a little bit pretentious or whatever, but still. If I go to the book of Judges there, is there someone who will be prepared to read that text for us, that single verse? Let's listen into it.
And all that generation were likewise gathered to their fathers. Another generation arose after them, which had not experienced the deliverance of the Lord or the deeds that he had wrought for Israel.
Okay, book of Judges then. A point in time where we have no kings yet. The book of Kings that is coming now, the second book of Kings over there. If Judy will read for us that verse from chapter 22 of the second book of Kings as well, we'll take the two together.
Assuredly, I will gather you to your fathers, and you will be laid in your tomb in peace. Your eyes shall not see all the disasters which I will bring upon this place. So they brought back the reply to the king.
Okay, all right. Well, when you see those verses, you may be asking yourselves, what's the connection between those verses and where we are right now? And I think that perhaps the image that is being conveyed by that, by those two verses that Judy read for us, she's conveying with her hands as well. Do you want to explain what you're doing with your hands, Judy?
I'm struck by the expression gathered to your fathers, that notion of gathering, and I'm just trying to visualize how that connects to the burial places and how people were buried in that time.
Okay, so I'm not sure whether it's fair to put you in the situation of having to volunteer for anything, but are there volunteers in the group for anything? Do we have?
Yeah, that's
Do we?
a really open question. Volunteer for what?
No, when you volunteer, you never know what you're volunteering for.
Well, I think I know what you're going to volunteer us for, so I volunteer.
Okay, All right. So she gets the extra ice cream. Okay. What do you think I was going to make you volunteer for?
Well, I work at the Bacon Center, so I have a little insight that I'm trying really hard to keep to myself.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, perhaps you'll get up all the same. And let's see if there's any other volunteers who would like to, anyone want to work at the Bacon Center?
I'll volunteer.
All right. We have 2 volunteers over there.
Can I do it?
And I'm going to suggest this.
Oh, no. Can I be in my
Okay.
skirt? It's
You
okay.
can be in your
Okay.
skirt, yes. But in order for you to be able to take part in this, let's get a bit of a sense first to get the answer for Judy's supposition. Then we're going to look at the space, and then you 2 are going to be ready to help choose the place where you would like to volunteer. Okay. Those 2 verses. For Judy, the suggestion was that what we've got over here is gathering, and you're thinking that in a certain sense these places are like places where you and your ancestors can gather together almost, right? How do you do that physically? How do you gather together with your ancestors? Well, them bones are dry bones. And if them bones are dry bones, when are they going to be gathered? When they've dried up, right?
Is that what they volunteered for?
I didn't want you to have to buy too much
Not
ice
a
cream.
complete dry.
Okay, all right. However, I have a question of you even before you go further with Judy's supposition. When you die, do you think that you go up or down? Play with that image in your heads. Type in your answer quick to Murray. The first answer to come in there, we'll get you that ice cream as well. Do you go up or down? In your heads, instinctively, what do you think of when you die? Are you going to go up or down?
Part of you.
Judy, I've worked with Judy for a long time, and she probably will go up. Okay, you say up. What about the rest of you? How does it sound to you? Anyone replied yet?
Yeah, L thinks up.
Yeah, L goes up with Judy. Are there any ones who go down?
Ruth says up.
So
Karen says depends on who you are.
Howie and Judy are both going in their heads to the story of where Samuel meets with King Saul. And how does Samuel, who is dead already, meet with King Saul? He's raised, right, from Sheol. Which way do we go? Let's stick with the idea that if heaven is above and heaven is a place where the righteous will go to, that will be where you'll go up to. But let's also go to the question that Judy had raised for us. If you're going to be gathered, and your bones are going to be gathered as Maria suggested for us as well, then what's going to happen then in terms of you die? How are you going to be part of that great chain of being? And there's a book by a guy by the name of Jared Diamond in which he deals with the last few tens of thousands of years of human history. And part of the story is how you connect to your past, to your ancestors. And there's a sense of, we may think of it as death in terms of the fear of it, but if you know that you are going to be getting together with your ancestors at one place, and your bones are going to be gathered together with the other bones of your previous generations, then you can have that sense of wanting to go have your bones gathered, as these 2 texts seem to indicate to us. And where we are then, we're located in an area where, again, if you look at the photograph, and in a short while Elad will actually take the picture for you. The photograph was taken from, this gate is normally locked. I thought I was lucky. I found it unlocked last week, and it looks like they forgot. Coronavirus has had strange effects on all parts of Israeli society. So I was able to go above there in order to get a picture from that angle. If you're looking at it, you can see that there's quite clearly an opening where right now it's alongside where Alison is standing for us. And Elad, if you'll just come around a little bit and give us the sense of the space. Oh, you can see very, very clearly that there's a pretty large opening over there. And we're going to go back to that in just a short while, Elad. But that would be the place where the family bones would be collected.
They would be gathered.
How does that sound for you, Judy? You don't mind the idea? All right. But now let's come back with Elad one step up here and enter into the place from this side, looking that way once again. And stay where you are, it's fine. Because there's no problem now about the kedusha of the place, and it's been totally cleaned out. But what we've got over here, says Gabi Bar Pei, is not just a chance to see the manner in which people were buried and were able to join the great chain of generations, but much more than that. We have an insight into a structure which is very, very symmetrical. And it's not only symmetrical, but in all of the caves which we went along there, we could have also seen that they are measures according to an amah, a certain measure which we have. And like we know, railroads, for instance, they're narrow gauge and they're wider gauge railroads. There are amot which are Egyptian amot, and there are amot for this part of the world. Slightly different measures, but all of the caves, when they were carved out, were according to measures that were very, very exacting. And you can see that the symmetry on both sides that I'm pointing to now, as I go down a step that has been badly worn away to another step that is a little bit better, and onto the floor, everything is very symmetrical over here. And if I've got that sense of the symmetry of the place, I've now got to come back to the question of what happens before your bones are going to be gathered, because there's a problem. You can't just gather the bones.
Well, the skin's still on.
Yes. So, all right. It's no skin off your back, Maury. But all the same, if we're going to now look at these different chambers, we can have a look at them and perhaps get 2 volunteers. Let's go. You want to come up there? And the rest of us will have a look and see how they are going to consider. Can you come around a bit,
Yes,
Alison?
I already know, so should I just do it or should I wait?
You can wait for Alison to do it first. Alison, I want you to find a natural way, comfortable way of lying down over here, and the rest of us get close enough to be able to get a sense of what she's doing.
I see it.
Oh, God.
What would you see?
These indentations.
Well, what are they for?
Your head.
Not
Yes.
your toes?
No.
Okay. All right.
I was wondering what those were for.
Okay. So,
Okay. Keeping social distance when we're dead.
all right. I should have bought hats more than cushions,
That's okay.
but it's not a bad one, right? Okay. Now, Alison,
Yes.
all that you have to do is wait for another 11 months or so.
Yes.
And within 11 months,
I'll be
you'll be a lot thinner.
just dry. Just bones.
And you will be ready then to be. Are you two related, by the way?
No.
Oh, then we're going to have to separate you. Okay. Because
Wait, I have a question.
maybe you're lost.
Yeah. Was this part in the cave or was this exposed?
Fantastic question, because I was about to show something to you,
Yeah.
and Alison's helped us. Have a look, guys. Do you need my help to read where the ceiling is over here? This is the height of the ceiling. It would have come all the way across, more or less like by the height of my hands there. You would have gone into the room at that level. Eitan could quite easily walk there. The ceiling is above his head there, but this is the ceiling of the cave. And it's going to, wherever you can look at any of these, you can actually see where the ceilings are. It's very clear to you once you know what you're looking at. I know that I knew nothing when I first came here. But with Gabi, he helped me understand every aspect. So you're quite right in your question. If this is the manner in which people went to their deaths and their bones were gathered, the two of you, by the way, if you're comfortable, that's fine. And if you prefer standing or sitting up, you're welcome to come back to us. Okay?
Back to life and from the dead.
Oh, okay. No Lazarus over here. So, fantastic. It says 8 times. If we have a look over here, actually, there's a room for a head over there. You can see at each of them that they were often laid like sardines, head to feet, head to feet. And we don't have enough remaining at that end to be able to make out, but we can certainly see on the shelves that are over there, that same side.
How
that
long
same
would,
aspect.
did you say, maybe, how long would a body be there before it'd be ready to go?
Around 11 months or so.
So it's not a lot of, I mean, for a community, that's not a lot of...
It's not for a community necessarily, because these are going to be the bones of a particular family. And the family may be
Why did they
measured
come up with 11 months?
as a
What
clan.
was significance?
I suspect that because we know that our mourning practices are
That's why I'm
connected,
asking, is that-
I think that there's a definite connection. The truth is that Gabi would be the one for me to ask, and I would certainly take anyone over here saying for sure this or for sure that.
It was on, like on lime, right? It was on lime, and the body would deteriorate on the lime, no? I think there was, for the body to deteriorate, I think they put limestone under it, and that's why it deteriorated.
Well, I think they're using the limestone because it's soft enough to be able to cut into, and not necessarily because it's the lime that will help with the decomposition.
Deterioration, no?
But I'm not sure about that, and that's a good question. That's a good aspect to be examined further, and I will try and get us back some sort of answer on that.
We'll Google it.
I want to have a look with you people at another text, and I'd like people to be able to respond to it as we're looking. So I'm turning now, before we come back to this particular area, I'm turning back to the texts with you. And the coming text that we have is very, very much related to this particular spot that we came to. Let's listen into Isaiah. And I've put it under the title of Isaiah's indictment. And will you read it for us, Eitan? Can you read it with a sense of anger? Do you have that in you?
The Lord will bring this charge against the elders and officers of his people. It is you who have ravaged the vineyard. That which was robbed from the poor is in your houses. How dare you crush my people and grind the faces of the poor, says my Lord, God of hosts. The Lord said, because the daughters of Zion are so vain and walk with heads thrown back, with roving eyes and with mincing gait, making a tinkling with their feet, my Lord will bear the pates of the daughters of Zion. The Lord will uncover their heads. On that day, my Lord will strip off the finery of the anklets, the fillets and the crescents, of the eardrops, the bracelets and the veils, the turbans, the armlets and the sashes, of the talismans and the amulets, the signet rings and the nose rings, of the festive robes, the mantles and the shawls, the purses, the lace gowns and the linen vests, and the kerchiefs and the capes.
So I don't know what associations you're having with that passage. Thank you, Eitan, for reading it for us. But I'd like to suggest to you that you consider for yourselves going into your synagogues, not unfortunately this year in all likelihood, but go back in your minds to synagogues that you may have attended around Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, wherever you may be. Have you ever been in synagogue on those days where the members of the congregation dress in their finery? Steve's nodding with his head. I'm hoping that none of us, or very few of us, can actually have that association. But it's certainly one that speaks to me very, very strongly. In that, as a child, I remember growing up knowing that Yom Kippur was the time when people would dress in their most fancy items, not in their simplest clothes. And why is this relevant? Why is this passage at all relevant for us? How does it resonate in your ears in terms of the society that Isaiah is addressing around the same time that we're talking about? Before the destruction of the temple, at the time where we're talking about those Israelite tribes living in the city of Jerusalem or anywhere in the land and living with the kind of luxury that so clearly is described by Isaiah here. He didn't make up, this isn't a modern composition of words. All of those sorts of jewels were amongst the jewels that people wore. How do we know that? Well, that brings us back to that opening which Alison was looking into earlier on. And if we have a look at that opening together, once again, I'd like us to get the camera to go into there. I'm not sure if you even have a way of lighting it up for a moment in there. It's possible we may get a chance to do something that I've never been able to do. But you can see that it's actually quite a deep hole that's over there. It's a hole that is close to, it's over about 2.5 meters or so long. It's deep and it's high. Oh, no, that's it. Okay, sorry, excuse me, that wasn't supposed to be done right now, but Maury was showing me what you can see, and it's actually now got a sense of what you're seeing. Thank you very much, Alad. Now I've had a chance to see it inside with that sort of illumination as well. And here's the story. All of the items that you can see on your pages now, on this page, this particular page with Isaiah, were found inside there. These are only a fraction of what was found inside there. What was found inside there included earrings like you see in that picture, jewels made of all sorts of colors. If we want to get a sense of some of the other items that we have over there, with a little bit of help from Eitan once again, whoops, that was my attempt to give you a hard backing for it. Have a look at these earrings. Look at the beauty of the earrings that were found. Look at these signet rings over here. What about glass items? Beautiful glass items found, most of them intact. What about weapons that were found there? Arrowheads. Arrowheads were found here as well. You have some of the pictures of what was found, and you can obviously get very many more. But I want to put them back in the context of Isaiah's text. Isaiah's talking about the way that the women would dress, and I want to apologize for the gender discrimination that's taking place there. In our day, we don't like that, but no doubt in his day, this was the fashion that people would walk with, as he calls it, mincing steps. And they would see that everything about what they were doing was going to be to attract the attention of other people. But what sort of society were they living in? If all these items were found inside that particular cave, and I said I want to come back to that, let me fill in the story with Gabi's perspective as well. By 1979, he's been working in this area for 4 years. And towards the end of the season, with his last group of school kids who are volunteering or being forced to volunteer to clean, he says that they were cleaning out cave. This is cave number 24. That's chamber 25. And they were clearing out. They'd already reached this bedrock that we've been standing on, looking at and sitting in all around us. Inside that little chamber, a school kid had gone in with a little brush and was told, sweep up whatever dust you can to clear it out. We're ending our dig today. And after a short while of the morning's dig, this kid comes up to Gabi and he says, what's this? And what he's holding is an object which, I'm sorry, I didn't put on your papers at all. It's a little oil lamp. And Gabi said, that's an oil lamp. Where did you find it? He said, oh, I just found it inside the cave that I was dusting out. Gabi says to him, he thinks nothing of it excepting to reprimand him. He said, I told you to just dust. But when the kid comes back a few minutes later with another object, Gabi's angry because he was supposed to be dusting, not digging. And yet the archaeologist in charge of that particular chamber that we looked into had said that they'd reached bedrock. What had happened is that this obnoxious kid, as Gabi called him in Hebrew, a namer, which stands for a nudnik, which is a Hebrew word, a nudnik of the first degree, a namer. This nudnik of the first degree had actually discovered what his professional people in charge of him had failed to notice. They had stopped at the roof or a layer that had fallen in on what had been underneath the layer before it fell in, which meant that anything under there had been held intact, and no one had ever tried to take those objects out because the roof had fallen in upon them. There'd been a little bit of a landfall inside the cave, and that was what had happened. Gubby says, basically, that he owes his world fame to the fact that there was one nudnik who did the job that the archaeologists had failed to do at that moment. Because what happened was that when they discovered, they got the kid out of there, and they brought in the professional archaeologists to start removing things very carefully. And when they did get to bedrock, they had cleared this depth of cave-in, which included around 1,000 items, of which a few dozens of them appear in the various images that I've shared with you today. They give us an understanding of a material culture. The burying of the dead give us an understanding of a symbolic culture and a religious culture. But amongst those objects, there's a whole other dimension to the story as well. And that takes us to the last of our pages for this particular visit. Because they found two tiny pieces of silver, each rolled up very, very tightly. It took the laboratories of the Israel Museum a period of 3 years to unravel that silver. One of them was 99% pure silver. Very, very fine metalwork. Both of them together had the texts which appear on the sheet that we have now in our notes there. I called it a blessing on your head. And in a certain sense, this is where archaeology is no longer archaeology. And this is when our own attempt to understand the story moves on to another dimension entirely. Because on these two sheets then, these little pieces of silver included versions of the text which appears just beneath the blessings. The way that you are familiar with them, wherever you may be, if you go to a synagogue where they recite the priestly blessing, is with the words that appear there. The Lord bless you and protect you. The Lord deal kindly and graciously with you. The Lord bestow his favor upon you and grant you peace. We know that Jeremiah, around this time, talks about silver being brought from Tarshish. Is that the Tarshish of Jonah? Almost certainly it must be. And that's also First Temple story. And we know in the book of Proverbs that there's a phrase that says, tie them over your heart always, bind them around your throat. What were those little amulets there in terms of our culture, in terms of the culture of the Jewish people? Well, the blessing has stayed with us over the last 2,500 years. The scholars debate the manner in which, whether we learn from the fact that the words were sometimes in a slightly different order, tells us that there were other versions of the book of Bamidbar or Numbers, or whether, in fact, what we have over here is something that predates the writing of the book of Numbers. And the debate between the scholars I'm going to leave on the side for the moment. We have curricular writers over here who will take us into that at some point. But what I'm going to ask us to consider then is how, when we look at these texts, we take these images for us. And what do we learn about our culture in terms of the story that takes us back over 2,500 years. Before we start wrapping things up, I do want to see if there are additional responses which are coming in from the field or from us over here, literally in the field. And so if there aren't questions that you've raised from overseas, then if there are questions over here or comments or reflections, then let's perhaps use them to help us as we move towards closure. Alison, let's see if we can pick up your question on the mic as well.
Okay. I'm just curious, like what, I mean, all of this reminds me of the pyramids. You know, the Egyptians buried. Why would we bury with jewelry? We don't do that today. So what was their thinking? Were they kings? Were these only for kings? But why do kings need anything in the afterlife? But why? How did they get to that point?
Why do you assume they're kings?
Only because, like, the Egyptians, not all Egyptians, but, you know, they were the ones that had these elaborate tombs with jewels, with things to take with them.
Yeah.
So why would they need this? Why would Jews need these? Why would these ancient people need these things?
Let's take some additional reflections and see whether we can put them together. Okay? I'm hoping that the microphone picked up your voice strongly enough there. Alad says yes. Who else wants to throw in an observation, a question, a comment? Judy, please.
Just, I guess I'm commenting on the fact that it wasn't the affluence that bothered Isaiah, it was the affluence at the expense of the poor. And I think that's an important thing to
Fantastic. So there's a social agenda that he has over there, but the affluence which he describes is confirmed for us by seeing that this particular extended family were burying their dead. And by the way, they found the remains of a few dozens of people from the family within this particular receptacle. Okay? So these 1,000 objects there are capturing a very, very rich culture. A culture that's rich in I would say, in every sense of the word. Not just material rich, but that it's not that the family was rich, but that their lives, the lives that people were living, they weren't cave people. They were people living lives in which the objects that they had were very fine objects. The earrings, by the way, are earrings which are manufactured with a skill that we know from a Melton participant from Park Avenue Synagogue who's a jeweler, who sells her jewelry on Fifth Avenue, or used to. She said, I couldn't make some of these objects. The craftsmanship over here is too sophisticated for me. So I think that your comment's very worth taking. Let's listen in to any other perspectives.
Was this like did we talk about what this room would have been?
This would be the entry room in which you came into a complex of burial chambers. And presumably different families were going to be buried, one across this side, one over there. Here you've got almost the same as you've got over there. You've got the same structure, basically, with room for over here, 4 people, and there would have been additional room perhaps over there. Here you've got the deterioration has left us with a different understanding of it. But in each of these rooms, you would have had another part of the process, and I don't know whether it was stage by stage. It wasn't a rotation of bodies or anything. But it's clear that certain of the ledgers were used for different purposes, including perhaps draining of body fluids and other such things. Okay? But all of these things then together are opening up a world for us. And if there aren't other comments that you want to share, and if they haven't been shared from the learners over there, then I'm going to perhaps suggest that we come back to Alison's comment and question, really. For you, it was a matter of the Egyptians, because you're thinking of the pharaohs and the manner in which...
Yes, the close priests, yes.
Okay, the elite is being buried. This is a socio-economic elite, but it's not royalty.
No, it's not.
We think that we know about some other tombs which may be connected with royalty from later periods as well. But what we have over here is an understanding that these people, remember I said to you, they're not Jews in the sense that we think of Jews. They're part of the chain, but they're at a stage where the messages of Isaiah and of Jeremiah are regarding the manner the manner that they're living their lives. But the lives that they have mean that, excuse me for the sexism again about the comment, but almost certainly it was a woman wearing an amulet on her chest. And on that chain, with that beautiful silver amulet over there, she had that blessing because there's a blessing on her head. And it worked. Or it felt like it worked. And you felt that when you were burying with all of these objects, you were expressing something of that wealth. Are we at a phase where the kind of Judaism that we understand is something which is in itself, in its own kind of formation? Well, it's always being formed and reformed. That's why Jeremiah tells them earlier on, you are taking your children and offering them to a sacrifice? Is that your understanding? Haven't we gone beyond that? Well, it would seem that we haven't. Otherwise he wouldn't have been dealing with that. And this is another element in that cultural reflection.
Yeah. And like Judy said, like his anger
Take off your mask, Melton.
his anger was that they didn't care for the poor. It wasn't that they were wealthy. So I guess it's even more of an insult to the poor that they would take these jewels and throw them in a grave and not even do any good with it. Maybe that's to add that.
No, I think that the image that's coming for me out of the two comments coming together is enriching my understanding of that story for sure. And I think that because we know that we're approaching the end of our time together today, I'm going to perhaps offer for you the opportunity to consider two things. The one is that in the context of these weeks, I opened with the period between the fast that we had last week and the fast that will be on the Jewish calendar in just 2 weeks' time. I think that in these weeks, the reflection that we may want to take with us is how, when we go back to the earliest known passage, which is identified as biblical, these verses, which are based on the book of Numbers and some of the other texts, which has only been deciphered in the United States since Gabi's articles were published, some of them show the influence of the book of Shmot and passages of Dvarim. In the other 18 lines there, other sources are there. These lines that we have over there take us to the oldest text. For us as Melton people, that's always got a special significance. The oldest text that we have from our sources anywhere. And when we close the loop that we're closing brings us then to the question of not just that we lost one temple and then another temple, but what sort of society did we want to build then as now? And the very last passage that we're not going to get to in terms of situation, but you have a picture of it, is a sculpture and a quote from that sculpture reminding us of the vision of the end of days. We came to, in a certain sense for the Jewish people, the beginning of days. Those amulets were the first time that we have the oldest source that we have anywhere that has ever been found with the name of God appearing. And those verses, which are the oldest verses that we have from our sources. And at the same time, here we are 2,500 years later, trying to dig as deep as we can into our culture. So I thank you for your time, and I'm passing it over to our boss, who will say whatever.
Thank you all for being a part of this very first attempt at Melton Travel Seminars Online. I just want to say to Haim that Michael Troner remembers you showing him the amulet at the museum, and he thanks you for that. So and I want to thank all the people from the extended staff of the Florence Melton School Institute here for being a part of the group, and I hope that when August comes around and you hear about that, you'll join for those Tiulim, those tours as well. I want to just invite the people who are here, both the staff and others who are online, to send email to Haim, letting him know any reactions, any things that you saw during the course of this dress rehearsal that you think were really excellent, things that could be improved, and we thank you for all of your input and all your support. Take care.
Thank you. Since Korban Habayit, we don't clap at the end of this.
Okay.
Thanks, guys, for being, and now you're really welcome to share whatever you'd like to.
Say quickly.
What's the time?
Rachel said awesome. Gail said that was incredible. Andrea said well done. Randy said fabulous. Karen, very nice. Affiliate well, felt like he's there in Jerusalem with Haim. Andrea, group shot.
Andrea wants a group shot?
No.
Did we do
Should we
one?
do a group shot?
Steve, want to take a group shot?
Oh.
Was the group shot?
Let's do a group. Well,
Let's do the group shot.
and then we'll go give a